Good morning. Welcome to Kenya News Update today. I'm your host, and we're diving deep into a story that sits at the intersection of digital promise and geopolitical peril. On one hand, we have a major European investment in Kenya's future, connecting hundreds of schools to the internet. On the other, a disturbing trend of Kenyan citizens being lured into a foreign war under false pretenses. These two narratives, seemingly separate, paint a complex picture of Kenya's place in a rapidly changing world. Today, we'll unpack the European Union's last mile connectivity of schools project, analyze the ongoing scandal of African men being tricked into fighting for Russia, and debate what these developments mean for Kenya's sovereignty and its youth. Our debate format will feature perspectives from education experts, geopolitical analysts, and voices from the diaspora. Let's begin. Our first chapter takes us to Kajiado County. Just days ago, the European Union marked what it called a major milestone in Kenya's digital education journey. EU officials, alongside Kenyan dignitaries, visited NKCT Primary School. The occasion? Celebrating the connection of 363 public primary schools to what's being termed sustainable internet. This is under the EU-funded Last Mile Connectivity of Schools, or LCMS, project. The EU says this milestone highlights ongoing efforts to bridge Kenya's digital divide. And that divide is significant. While Kenya boasts a fast-growing digital economy and an estimated 27 million internet users, access is far from uniform. The promise here is profound, bringing the world's knowledge to classrooms in remote areas, empowering a new generation. But is this purely altruistic development aid, or is there a strategic calculus at play? We'll explore that shortly. First, let's look at the numbers on the ground. The LCMS project isn't just about laying cable, it's about integration. According to project data, these 363 newly connected schools encompass a significant population. We're talking about impacting the digital literacy of thousands. To understand the scale, let's visualize the immediate reach. The project directly serves a student body in the tens of thousands, but perhaps more critically, it empowers the educators. The project has reportedly trained over 4,400 teachers on digital pedagogy and online safety. That's a massive upskilling initiative. However, a deeper look reveals a phased approach. The initial pilot phase, which just concluded, connected these 363 schools, but the ambition is larger. The total target for the LCMS project is to connect 1,000 schools across Kenya. That means the current achievement represents just over one-third of the ultimate goal. When we place the 363 completed schools next to the 637 schools remaining, we see the journey ahead. This is a substantial commitment, but it's a marathon, not a sprint. So, why is the EU investing so heavily in Kenya's digital infrastructure? The official line is about partnership and shared values, fostering digital inclusion as a cornerstone for development. There's certainly truth to that. An educated, digitally fluent Kenyan population is good for Kenya's economy and stability, but analysts point to a broader geopolitical chessboard. Europe is keen to cement influence in a strategically important East African nation. Kenya is a regional hub, a member of the African Union, and a key security partner. By embedding its technology and standards in the education system, the very foundation of a society, the EU is building long-term soft power. It's creating a generation that may naturally look towards European platforms, policies, and partnerships. This isn't necessarily nefarious, it's classic diplomacy. But it does raise questions about digital sovereignty. Who controls the data? Who maintains the infrastructure? Are there strings attached to this sustainable internet? Proponents argue the benefits, educated children, skilled teachers, far outweigh these abstract concerns. They ask, should we deny students connectivity over geopolitical worries? The counter-argument is that Kenya must aggressively develop its own parallel digital capacity to avoid over-reliance on any single foreign partner. This conversation about opportunity and external influence takes a dark and urgent turn when we shift our gaze from Kajiado classrooms to the battlefields of Ukraine. Our second chapter is an investigation, first reported by The Guardian Africa, into how African men, specifically Kenyans, are being systematically tricked into fighting for Russia. The headline is chilling. I didn't know how to shoot, how African men have been tricked into fighting for Russia. The subheading, lured by false job adverts, they are unknowingly enlisted on arrival and put in mortal danger. This is not a rumor, it's a documented pattern. Take the story of Stephen Oduor. He was unemployed, a father looking to provide. He saw an online advert for a well-paying plumbing job in Russia. It promised a lifeline. Last August, he and 6 other Kenyans flew from Nairobi to St. Petersburg, full of hope. Their reception was the first red flag. The man who met them took them to a house where their passports and luggage were confiscated. They were then transported to a military camp. The plumbing tools never materialized. Instead, they were given a uniform and a gun. Stephen Odier's poignant quote says it all. "I didn't know how to shoot." He was not a soldier. He was a desperate job seeker trafficked into a war zone. This is a human trafficking operation with state-level backing. The modus operandi is consistent: fake online job offers for construction, driving, or security work in Russia, often with salaries advertised in Kenyan shillings. The targets are vulnerable men in a country where, despite economic growth, unemployment remains a critical issue. Kenya's population is young and growing. According to the last national census in 2019, Kenya's total population was 47,558,296. A significant portion of that population is of working age and seeking opportunity. When legitimate opportunities are scarce, these fraudulent adverts find fertile ground. The consequences are dire. These men sign contracts they don't understand, often in Russian, supposedly for security work. Upon arrival, the deception is revealed. They undergo minimal rushed weapons training, sometimes for just 2 weeks, and are shipped to the front lines in Ukraine, where casualty rates are catastrophic. They are cannon fodder, with little combat training and no desire to be there. Their families back in Kenya are left in the dark, often only discovering the truth when they stop receiving calls or when a body needs repatriation. The scale of this is still emerging, but it points to a severe vulnerability. It exploits two Kenyan realities: the digital connectivity that allows such adverts to spread, and the economic pressure that makes them tempting. This creates a painful irony. While one EU project seeks to use the internet to educate and uplift Kenyan youth in 363 schools, criminal networks, allegedly with Russian state tolerance, are using that same digital landscape to prey upon them, luring them to their deaths with false online promises. This juxtaposition is stark. It shows the internet as both a ladder and a trap. The Kenyan government has expressed outrage and summoned the Russian ambassador. But the question is about enforcement and protection. How robust are Kenya's digital literacy programs in teaching citizens to spot such sophisticated fraud? How effectively can it monitor and shut down these predatory recruitment channels? And what is the responsibility of social media platforms where these adverts often appear? Now, let's bring these threads together in our debate segment. We have two guests joining us. First, Dr. Amani Akath, an education policy expert from the University of Nairobi. Welcome, Dr. Akath. And second, Colonel David Mwangi, a former military attaché and now a geopolitical security analyst. Welcome, Colonel Dr. Akath. Let's start with you. The EU School Connectivity Project, a pure good or a Trojan horse for digital influence? Dr. Akath, thank you. It is overwhelmingly a positive development. We must not let perfect be the enemy of good. The digital divide in Kenya is not just an urban-rural issue, it's an inequality multiplier. These 363 schools represent hope. The training of over 4,400 teachers is a force multiplier for quality education. Yes, we must have clear data protection agreements and invest in local tech maintenance capacity. To frame this as a neocolonial project is to dismiss the agency of Kenyan educators and students who will use these tools to build their own future. The risk isn't in the connectivity. It's in our own failure to build a complementary national digital education curriculum that is truly Kenyan. Colonel Mwangi, your response? And how does this connect to the Russia scandal? Colonel Mwangi, Dr. Akath is right about the need for local agency, but she underestimates the strategic play. The EU is securing a pipeline of influence. Now, contrast that with Russia's approach. It's not building schools, it's destroying lives. This trafficking scheme is a grotesque form of asymmetric warfare and a blatant violation of sovereignty. It treats Kenyan citizens as expendable commodities. It exploits the very economic conditions that education projects like the EU's aim to alleviate. The connection is this: both events show that Kenya is a playground for great power interests. Our national security apparatus must now expand to include digital border control, policing these predatory online spaces with the same vigor we patrol our physical borders. Dr. Akath, isn't that a bit alarmist? This is a criminal trafficking issue, not necessarily state policy. Dr. Akath, the scale and pattern suggest at least state acquiescence. But my concern is preventative. Where is the massive public awareness campaign? We are training teachers on internet safety. Are we running nationwide ads on TV, radio, and social media warning young men about these specific job scams in Russia? We need to weaponize our own connectivity for protection. The government's response has been diplomatic protest, which is necessary, but the front line is the smartphone in a village in Kisumu or Mombasa. Colonel Mwangi, what's the endgame for Russia here, and what should Kenya's concrete response be? Colonel Mwangi, the endgame is manpower. Russia faces a demographic crisis and wants to offset its own battlefield losses with foreign bodies. Kenya's response must be multi-layered. 1. Work with Interpol and cybercrime units to dismantle the recruitment networks. 2. Demand a full, transparent audit from Moscow of all Kenyan citizens on its territory, especially those holding security contracts. 3. And most importantly, accelerate economic opportunities at home. The ultimate vaccine against this poison is a thriving job market. Projects that build real skills, like the teacher training Dr. Akath mentioned, are part of that. But we need them at a scale that matches our population growth. Let's look at that demographic context. Kenya's population, as of the 2019 census, was over 47.5 million. It's a young nation. Every year, hundreds of thousands enter the job market. The official unemployment rate for youth is notoriously high, often cited in the range of 30% or more for young adults. This statistic is the tinderbox. When you have a situation where nearly 1 in 3 young people seeking work cannot find it, they become desperate. They become perfect targets for schemes that promise the world. This 30% figure isn't just a number, it's a national security vulnerability. It's what traffickers and hostile foreign actors bank on. So, when we talk about the 4,400 teachers trained or the 363 schools connected, we must ask, is this pace sufficient to outrun the desperation that affects a third of our youth? The digital divide isn't just about access to information, it's about access to legitimate opportunity. If the only opportunity the digital world shows a young man is a fake job in Russia, then we have failed. This brings us to our final analysis. The two stories we've covered today are two sides of the same coin: Kenya's engagement with a volatile world. The EU project represents a formal, state-to-state partnership with transparent, if debatable, goals. The Russia trafficking scandal represents a shadowy, predatory exploitation that breaches all norms of international conduct. For Kenya under President William Ruto, and in a world where the US president is Donald Trump, the lesson is clear: foreign policy can no longer be just about diplomacy in capital cities. It must extend to protecting citizens in cyberspace and in foreign employment corridors. It requires a new kind of literacy, digital, media, and geopolitical, to be woven into the very fabric of education. The teachers being trained in those 363 schools need resources to teach their students not just how to use the internet, but how to survive it. In conclusion, the connection of 363 schools is a step forward on a long road. But that road is fraught with new dangers. The internet that brings textbooks and global collaboration to a child in Kajiado is the same vector that delivers a deadly lie to their older brother in Nairobi. Kenya's challenge is to harness the promise while building a resilient defense against the peril. This means vigilant partnerships, relentless economic growth, and an education system that builds critical thinkers, not just internet users. The future of Kenya's next generation will be determined by how well we manage this double-edged sword of global connectivity. Thank you to our guests, Dr. Akath and Colonel Mwangi, and thank you for watching. For continued in-depth coverage of the stories shaping Kenya, subscribe to Kenya News Update today.